Hi, everyone. This is Jan Guarino, and you're in Fearless Watercolors. Today, we're doing a nice winter scene of a deer in snow. And so along with the contour drawing, which is pretty simple, there's a whole lot of masking going on. And I hope you added your masking already. I'm going to switch cameras. I'm going to show you both the photo and my masking here. Okay. Now it's really hard to see the contour. The contour looks something like this, just a plain drawing with the deer showing it. You really don't need more than that. I'll just keep that on there for a second. What we see here is the masking fluid, the light blue fluid, put on, and I put it on 3 different ways, okay? The first way that I put it on was these puffy little areas here. They are done with a cotton swab. Now, what you have to be careful of is that you don't create too much of a pattern. So I may not be painting to every edge because sometimes it looks like maybe I did create a little bit of a pattern of dot, 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 dot. See these, like, we'll see how it looks. Usually my experience with masking fluid is after I remove it, I'm not done yet. I still need to do more. So just know that that is a really good possibility, and more likely than not that we have work to do once we lift the masking fluid. I also used the fine splatter. I used an old toothbrush, and then I sort of took a brush and I kind of added these bigger dashes. If you use a toothbrush, you want to wash it out right away, otherwise it'll get gooey and your masking fluid will ruin it and you can't use it again. And if you use a brush, you can dip your brush into a soapy solution or some kind of oil or something that preserves the bristles, and you can then use it and put your masking fluid on, or just be sure to rinse out your brush sooner than later. Don't let the masking fluid kind of stay in there. Okay, so I'm using 140 cold press, or just cold press. I think that's what it is. Let me just check. Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I would think I would know by now, but yes, it feels thin. If you're using your 300 hot press, perfect. If you're using your Saunders 200, perfect. It's all good. So the idea behind this, right, is what we want to do is we want to be able to paint the deer as if there's no masking fluid down. That is an interesting little thought there, right? We're painting, and we're kind of going to ignore what's going on with the deer. However, the whole top part really has the most color, right? The most contrast against the snowflakes. So what I'm thinking of doing, and I like to think, watercolors is a lot of thinking. And if you think and plan a little bit, you'll find that you have an understanding of how you got success. So I'm going to start with the top, and I'm going to add, there's some beautiful colors in here. I'm going to use my Moon Glow. I'm going to use indigo. I see a little green. I see a little raw sienna. I see maybe a little burnt sienna. So your printer may have printed it out slightly different. I couldn't really, of course, depending on your printer and the settings, and also things like, how much ink you have left in your printer. Sometimes we run out of ink, that kind of thing. Let's be sure to add water to our paints with a little bit of, our gum arabic in there, which is the agent, the property that moves our paints. Watercolors move because of gum arabic. And I'm just going to start on the top with a little bit of color. This is and it's not wet. I did not wet it. I'm just going to feather out the top, since I don't know how high I want to go or how low I want to go. I'm going to go around the antlers only because they're sort of a different color, and they there's kind of like a lightness to them.
What color are you using?
Shadow violet. But I'm going to be adding a lot of other colors. So feather it down so that you don't have any hard edges. And now once you get that wet, and if you go over your antlers a little bit, it's not really that big a deal because parts are light and parts are dark. So don't even worry about going over the antlers too much. Just giving a little bit of water. So you could use your shadow violet, you could use your moon glow. And what we want to do is we want to just kind of drop it into the wet area. So this is wet into wet now. I'm just having it come down so that it kind of nicely sits around my contour drawing. And I don't want anything more than I want it to be soft, very, very soft. Okay. So while this is wet, just make sure you soften your edges so you don't end up with hard edges. We don't want hard edges. You can go ahead and use all your colors that we mentioned. That's a little indigo, right? Drop a little indigo in, let it sort of move around. Little indigo here and there. And let it maybe flow a little bit. You know, that's pretty. Look at that. Look at what's happening when I let it move into the wet area. Beautiful, right? Going around the deer and his little hiney here. And I'm just feathering this down because I love nothing more than this kind of drips. So I'm going to just sort of stay over here for a moment and just add those colors that we discussed. Maybe a little bit of burnt sienna could be really nice. Nice warm burnt sienna. And because there's a lot of colors that I see in this background here. So if we add it now, we're going to be in really good shape for later on. And just keep adding colors till you are happy with what you see kind of happening. Now, what's interesting about working this way with masking fluid is that, of course, you're going to, it's going to sort of go around the areas that have the masking fluid. So that's, that gives it yet another dimension, right? And you do need to add, a bit of color so that your deer really does pop out. And the snow will too. So you'll notice I feathered down this side, so I don't really have to worry about that side quite yet. Right, that's just feathered down. And this is the time that you want to add your color because we kind of don't want to go back in and do this again. This is just a really good time to make sure that you have your colors in the tone that you're looking for. So if you want to go a little darker, it might have dried over here depending on the conditions in your environment there. It'll be different for each of us. So it's indigo, and I'm letting the water just cascade and carry it away. That's a little moon glow there. And by just lifting your paper and letting it flow around a little bit, that helps it to eliminate your brush marks. And I really don't want to see, I personally am not interested in seeing brush marks. I normally don't, unless it's a dry, thirsty, intentional mark, which doesn't, that happens, mostly at the end of a painting, I find is I want to eliminate my brush strokes at that point. At the end, I'm sorry, at the end of a painting is when I want to add my thirsty brush marks. That's what I meant to say. I'm trying to talk and paint at the same time. If you have your salt handy, now's a good time to drop some in. If it's too wet, like that is a little too wet. See all that moving over there? That's a whole lot of shaking going on. But maybe over here might be good. Maybe up here. We'll see. Salt is one of those kind of unexpected delights. And sometimes they're a little disappointing too. But we have enough colors on here for something wonderful to happen. And if you have a couple of areas like here, I sort of have a little lost edge right here because the deer is melting into the snow, right? So that's okay, right? So it's not so much of an outline. That area that you have that creates a soft edge will be really helpful when we to help the reindeer, the deer, sorry, not reindeer, help the deer integrate itself into the snow. So have some lost edges. Like I said, we're probably going to need to do something with the areas that are masked later on, once this is dry and once we have our painting done and we lift our masking, we're going to need to do something to it for sure. It's just the nature of the beast. I find that masking fluid just is one of those things that we need to, pay attention to after we lift it off. What would be a painting without a little splatter? Watercolors is just the perfect medium to do it in. And because you have some light areas, this is really soupy wet here, still really moving around. I've got some nice, interesting colors going on, a little change of things, some lights, some darks, some cools, some warms. That's really what I see in the background. So that's really going to be helpful. Got salt going on. We have a lot of interesting things that we're putting down. If you lose the antler a little bit, which I'm going to do right here, I think that's because it will go darker. It won't look cut out. So that's an interesting thing to think about too. And let's see, I'm going to do a little more splatter. Some browns. I want to feather this away. This is where the deer is here, his body's here. I'm just going to go like a light, because the color kind of seeped in there because it was, I lost an edge there. Don't be afraid of lost edges. They could really be so special. A little bit more color along the bottom. This is pretty wet. I got a lot of water going on here. So I'm just using it to my benefit so it doesn't sit there and it's seeping around and traveling, creating some very interesting things. The other thing you could think about is if you want to try, and dot spraying requires sort of the right timing, but doesn't look like it's a dot spray, but it says this. Not like it's pointing out. You could dot spray and create some beautiful blossoms as well. Just losing some edges here. I don't want that color kind of just sitting against the deer. I want it to be soft. It's a very soft painting. It's a soft photo, and I want the painting to reflect that. Get yourself where you're happy with what you see, and then we'll work on the deer, and we'll see, because this all has to dry. So as this is drying, we'll work on the features of the deer. Okay. And I think maybe a little bit more color down here for me. And we could add some nice dry brush marks later on as well. So let's get it to that point, okay? And don't overwork it. Just as I give you time doesn't mean you should be using it all. Stop when you feel you need to, and dry it, because it definitely will need to be dry. And that's what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dry it and see what happens, because I've got this huge wet area here. Okay, so pay attention to what's happening on your page and make yourself really, really happy with all the beautiful granulation and colors. So I just wanted to show you that as I'm drying it, I'm actually adding a little bit more salt, a little more color, and some splatter. Be careful not to heat your paper too much, because you don't want the masking fluid becoming sort of melted to the paper. So I'm going to mute myself a little bit more and dry this a little bit more, but I wanted to show you that I'm continuing to add color, add salt, and add splatters as I'm drying it. So it's still pretty damp, but What you really want to do is get it, just about dry. You may want to manipulate a couple little areas. I will tell you this, that one of the best surprises of these kinds of paintings is the deer and how great that comes out. And then all of a sudden, all these other things that you are worried about really don't matter. So I'd like to get into the deer sooner than later. At that point, all this background stuff should be dry, and then we could lift the masking and then really see what we have left. So that is where we should go next. So what this looks like is we're a little uncertain. It should look a little like, I don't know, snowy, messy, it's very hard to see what we're really going to end up with because we have to do the deer. So we're going to zoom in and we're going to work on the deer. That's a little too, okay, there we go. There, oh, look at that. Nice big, start with the eyes, start with a little brush, right? And grab your burnt sienna is a good choice. Some kind of brown, burnt umber, something to that effect would be perfect for the eye. I like to get the eyes because I feel like if I get the eyes, I really, they just, they're the soul, even of an animal. And you notice these markings kind of trickle down. What you need to do is actually just ignore anything that is going on with your masking fluid. Just ignore it. And we're just going to paint as if, there's nothing else going on. Leave some little whites. If you might have a little masking fluid on it, I don't know. Probably we're going to need tone and color in here, but just get the start of the eye going. Okay, that's really helpful. And that isn't the end of it, it's just the start of it. Okay. When we do something like this in this area, it doesn't mean it's finished. It just means we've just started to put it on. So I wanted to get the eye done. Let's do a little bit of the actual deer head, okay? Now, a good way to do this may be your Sexy Scumble brush. If you have a brush that's sort of very bristly and kind of, not really well defined, that could be a really very useful right now. So, and I'll show you the reason why. And you may want to test this out on a piece of paper. I'll just show you. See how I could get these like kind of hair marks going on? That's what I'm going to be looking for, but in a short staccato kind of way. Now you could do the same thing. If you don't have a Sexy Scumble brush, I recommend you find the video and take your old crappy sable brushes and do something interesting with them, like make a Sexy Scumble brush. I also recommend at the same time, so it doesn't get too hairy, taking a regular brush and just melting some of those marks right onto the paper, and even toning it down a little bit with a little bit of indigo. So you don't want all your marks being these brushy marks. It just gets a little too boring and a little too, what to say about that, except a little too boring, a little too expected. So we want that element of kind of surprise to be there a little bit, meaning there's some hair, but not everywhere. So I'm using a little bit of indigo and a little bit of my burnt sienna. You could also use raw sienna if you have it. You could use a little bit of your raw umber if you have it. Any of those beautiful browns. And so this is really what happens with Thirsty Brush. This is a Thirsty Brush approach. But I do love the idea of a lot of the marks melting also. It's not all the same kind of mark. And of course, you know, those are just some of the beautiful things that watercolor gives us, is the option of so many different beautiful marks. I can't speak for other mediums. But watercolors, this is, to me, this is really special. So that balance of watery marks and dry marks. And this again does not signify that I'm done in this area by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a start. There's so much I need to do. So we build it, right? We build it. So don't go to the scene, don't get frustrated, don't say I screwed it up, don't say anything, none of that negative talk, because we don't really know. And here's what I could tell you, because I've done a number of these animals before, these snow animals, is that when you do the reveal where you're taking the masking off, you really can see how great it came out. Now, don't put in a mouth. I'm going to talk to you about that mouth situation. So don't put that mouth in. We are going to do that. This is just a little subtle hint under the chin here, just a really light, subtle shift. So subtle. Now that we have that hair around there, you can see the eye is not dark enough. So then you could go back in and you could build the eye a little bit more. Give it more information. Just a hint of the eye over here. And I actually even see an eyelash, which is kind of fun. So let me back out. It's starting to appear. Even this is like not as, it's a little bit, it shouldn't be that white. So I'm going to add a little bit more color in there. But before I do, I want to get the nose in, because the nose is pretty dark, right? And it's a funny little shape. So now his head's 3/4. This is a little indigo and a little burnt sienna with the tiniest bit of water. So as we build our darks, we start seeing other things that we thought might have been a mistake or wrong or this or that. None of that negative talk. We don't want to do that. Right? But we start seeing what we have to build around, like this little patch right here. I'll use my scumble brush to do that. And I want to show you how I'm going to do the mouth. So save that. Don't do that yet, please. Melting some of these marks into the deer, just a little bit, melting it down. Sometimes if I want something to look really white, I'll add a little bit of light blue to it. So I'm just adding a little bit of light blue into this underneath area, just a little bit. It makes it look whiter for some reason, that blue. Just a little bit of a glaze right there. Nose doesn't quite seem to be the right shape, so check that out. It's getting there. Eye is kind of getting there. Going to just take some of this color and just lighten, get rid of the white. It's not really white. So I'm just sort of melting some of that down a little bit. We'll do some of the antlers with a nice deep brown, little burnt sienna, a little raw umber is good. If you don't have raw umber, just add a little bit of indigo. That antler kind of goes behind his head, his ear rather a little bit, so definitely want to get that. Just shows a little bit of three-dimensionality. I'm going to take this, because it's pretty white, saved it, and just soften the edge a little bit with my brush. Soften it a little bit. It's just really invites the color to come up into that area a little bit. Dropping in a little indigo to give it a little bit of rich, deep, dark contrast. Taking my little brush and just feathering these a tiny bit. And let me back out and show you your neck. I want to stay close so that you can see how I'm going about, how I'm building the face. As I see that it needs things, I want to add it and then move away from it. I don't want to stay on it and have it be too much. So it's a good way to not overwork an area is to say, let me come back to you. I'm not exactly sure what you need. So let me work around and then I'll come back. One of the things that I do see people doing is that they feel they need to finish an area before they move on. And yeah, I don't think you need to do that. In fact, I recommend not doing that. It's hard to tell what a painting needs sometimes when you're sitting so close to it. So take a little breath from it and move away from it into a different area. That's all I really am talking about. Back to my browns. When I drop a color in, sometimes I don't put it on the entire area. I just drop it in into a certain area, a certain spot, and I let it just melt into the wet areas. So if I drop a little color in here, because it's wet on either side, it's going to be pulled into those areas. Just the nature of watercolor. Using a pretty small brush, I got a number 0, I think, here. So use your browns, use a little indigo to give it a little bit of coolness. And it helps you to define what's going on the deer, what it needs. And I think this little spot right here on his nose, just above his nose, needs a little bit darker. I'm just looking at those markings. I don't know if that's just this deer or all deer. I have no idea. I have no idea. Inside the ear maybe needs a little bit more, something right there. Now, when you do the mouth, I want you to do it with the lightest little bit of blue that you can, okay? And I don't want you to put a big smile on him. What I'd like for you to do is it starts right under the nose, a little line, then break, and then a little bit more line. Okay, it's very, very, very subtle. And what I'm going to do actually is just melt the top up into the upper area a little bit. And it's a very subtle mouth. So I don't want to see any big old heavy lines there. It's so subtle. It really is all you need. By the way, this is a flat brush that I did the same thing with. Let me move this down and show you. I just took an old flat brush and I just cut it so that I could get nice hair on it. So that's, you don't have to always use a round sable. You could do the same thing with a flat, and this was a cheapy brush, really cheap. I don't, this doesn't have a name on it, it's crazy. So think about that. And so I'm going to use that brush. And don't worry if you don't have it, you know, you could use your other one, or you could just use a thirsty brush, just not even worry about any of that kind of stuff right now. I don't want it everywhere. I just want it in a couple of spots because it could get pretty overdone pretty quickly. Move this up. Sorry about that. A little bit of water. This is his neck going into his back right here. If your brush has too much water in it, it won't do this kind of dry brush mark. And if you're uncertain, just practice on a piece of paper, another piece of paper, and go back to it. Just adding a little bit of shadow right under here. If you make a mark that's too dark, don't go crazy, just take it and move it around and it will thin out and you'll be fine. See, don't go crazy. When I put a mark down and it's too dark, or I think it's too dark, what I do is what I just showed you, I just allow it to be, take my wet brush and just move it around a little bit. That's what I do. Don't go lifting, don't go doing anything dramatic. Don't like a mark? Good. Melt it out. Don't worry about it. It's really, you're going to see so much of this isn't going to matter when we lift the masking and we see what's going on. A couple little marks is really all you need. And I'm not sure I'm happy with his face yet, but maybe it's a little bit too white underneath. So I just take my time. I think partially it's his eye isn't quite dark enough. I think this needs to be a little shadowed underneath here a little bit. Sensitize your eyes to color. It's a little cool under here. So what you can do, or a little warm, make some decisions about what you save and what you paint. That's looking a little more realistic now. It's coming to. And I'm thinking here, the background could go a little darker here to have the deer a little bit more in lighter, right? So I'll mix a little bit of maybe moon glow, and I'm going to add a little bit more of here. Now I'm going to show you a nice way to add a little bit of reverse definition into the area that is with the hair, is I can go in and go closer. See what I'm doing? I'm taking the moon glow and going into a little spot of the hair, and then I want to feather this out. I don't want that to be there. But that little bit of feathering there, that's reverse definition. one of the great ways to use it. We used it last week on our birch trees. Okay, that is all I'm going to do for now. I don't want to do more because I want to see how everything dries, and I want to see what the masking looks like when we lift it. A couple of things we're going to do before that. Like, I'll just give you a little preview here. Taking some raw sienna and going in and doing some really nice brushwork. I think we're going to lift our masking before we do that, though. I think that would really come out really super nice. Yeah, all of this, I want to really go in and do some nice work to create this this shrubbery in front. And is my deer done? I don't know. Maybe not. It probably isn't. There's probably a little more that I want to do, but I want to just kind of wait and see right now. And the paper is on the damp side. It's not ready to be lifted, the masking fluid, so maybe spots are. We'll do that in a moment, okay? So what I'm going to say is that you could work more on your deer, okay? You could leave the masking in that area, but it's going to be really important to start lifting some of this masking fluid off. Because believe it or not, that's more the story than anything. So using your rubber cement pickup in the dry areas, I got salt, I got a little bit of everything going on here. You know what, I am going to lift it off of the deer also because I can't see how done it is or undone. And you could see about patterns. Look at how the patterns that happen there. We're going to soften those with that we put down with the cotton swab. That's what happens. But I'm going to show you how to fix it because I'm sure you all have that going on as well. And that's okay. It's part of the process. So this is what I was saying, like, actually, I'm going to lift it right off of him. I wanted to see. I always add more white if I want to. If your paper isn't dry, you really can't lift this up. But you can see the cotton swab is sort of blobby. You know, it's really not what we want. That's not the right look. But I like the white that it saved. But we're going to work on that. We're going to definitely fix all of that. I'm going to show you how. So masking fluid is nothing more than liquid rubber cement, which is why a rubber cement pickup is what takes it off. The other thing that does take it off if you don't have one is saran wrap, believe it or not. It takes it off really, really well. You sort of feel where it's still on there and where you have to continue to lift it off. So the tougher spots are these big areas that we did. And they look very blobby. But that's part of learning to work with masking fluid. Is that you're not stuck with anything. It's a really good lesson in what masking fluid does. Really preserves those whites of the paper beautifully. It's a lot of white paper, but we want to soften it. And if you're not sure if it's still on there, rub your fingers across it and you'll discover exactly where it is. And that's going to take you a little bit of time to do that, especially if you put down as much as I did, which you probably did. Okay. Lifted, done, over, gone. So now what I'm left with, oh, splatter up here. What I'm left with is these blobs, right? Okay. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with those. And we're going to do it with a pretty stiff brush. And we're going to put some color onto our brush. A little bit of, like in this case, like whatever you kind of have in your palette. And I'm going to go closer and I'll show you. We're going to sort of massage some of these areas and then soften it. So you can take it with a little bit of color. And, you know, I like just using what's kind of in my palette. I have like, you know, all kinds of colors in my palette. Or you could use the colors that we used, you know, to create this. Right? And bring it up and soften it. So really, you're just giving it another layer of color and dimension. And you can hold on to some of those, the bright whites or some of the softer whites. You could even soften the whole thing and be able to find yourself opportunities to go into these areas. See, like so, very soft. It would be hard to do this the other way. You know, this is one of those things where how do you save your whites? You know, well, we saved a lot of whites. We really did. We saved too much. So this is a lesson in what to do when you save too many whites and you're not happy with what you had put down, or you know you need to go a little further. Probably your best bet is to use a little bit of your Moon Glow or Shadow Violet and maybe a little bit of brown. Now let me back out and show you how much better this looks than that. Okay, so the fact that I have this down here is great. That I can do this and I could go in and I could adjust all of these marks. That's really great, right? That's really, I could hold on to a lot of the tops. I can go softer on some of the tops. Will this take some work? Sure, of course it will. That's just the nature of the beast. But it's another layer, another dimension of your painting. And how to work masking fluid, which is, you know, a big. It's wet, so I could splatter. So putting color down and then feathering it on the other side. See how I turned my brush? Let me do that again for you. I'll do it over here. I'm going to do it closer. This is a really important process. So I'm adding my color, right? And then I'm taking the color off my brush and just with water, notice how I'm just touching it with the tip of my brush and I'm letting it move into, I'm not pushing it this way. I'm allowing it to move into this area softly. So then if I drop some color in, now it's going to move very, very softly. Let me back out and show you how much better it's looking already. And that's what you want to do in every area that you have this bubble effect. Because if you put it down with the cotton swab, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get that unless you really manipulated it properly in the moment. And I'm going to figure that probably we all ended up with something pretty similar, which is this pattern of cotton swab pattern. And I like the white. I think the white looks really, really good, but there's just a little too much of it. So a little moon glow, a little bit of raw sienna, all of those colors are going to help tone it down and integrate those shapes and make it look that much more of an interesting background. Another thing that you could do, I want to show this to you, is taking your scrubber. This is a Wonder White scrubber from Blix, and you can actually go in with this a little bit this way, and just with a little bit of water and very, very, very gently soften some of the marks. What you don't want to do is you don't want to ruin the paper, right? You gotta be really gentle when you're doing this, but this is another great technique for softening edges. You just have to be super careful, especially if you're using 140. You want to be very, very careful about using that 140. And it just loosens it up, the color a little bit. It loosens up that edge a little bit. And that is another technique for softening your whites, your masking fluid. Now it's looking pretty snowy, which unfortunately we're supposed to be getting some. Just a little crazy. I don't want to mess with this too much because I have like nice white dots, but if you're missing any white dots on his face, you can always use your white opaque paint. So what am I doing now? Now I'm just taking a regular brush and I'm just keeping it very soft with just water, just moving it around in a circular way with water. And that's how we get beautiful edges and softness. The snow is very, very soft. So manipulate what you have going on in your snow. It's a little too wet right there. And if you feel like adding a little bit more salt, see what happens. You certainly can. Now that you added more color. It's a few layer process. You can take your brush in any area, and with a little bit of color and a little bit of water, you can manipulate your brush to soften any edge. If it's a little stubborn, take your scrubber and just lightly lighten up some of your marks. I kind of like some of these marks that are going on. They're kind of fun. They feel like really big snowflakes. And other ones were just too many. Which is what happens. So the last thing that I want to do is add the kind of twigs and some of the beautiful things that are going on in the background. So that will be, and then we'll evaluate it and see exactly what happened and how it looks and what it might need beyond what we gave it, right? We'll just take a determination and see. But there's some things close up here that I really want to get and utilize. So you can see I'm trying many different processes to get myself the look I'm looking for in each little area. Little dot spray will give me little blossoms. And all of those things add to the textures and interest of the snow. So lastly, what we'll be doing is adding, and let me just bring it into view for you. Adding these beautiful winter, dried kind of stuff there. That's really pretty. I want to add that in. So that'll be the last thing that we'll be doing. It's got to dry. Okay, so a couple of things. I do want the deer's back, sort of emphasized a little bit more. So I think the best way to do it is to take that, kind of dry brush and again, go back in with the background, a little bit of background and feather into it. So I'm going to go a little closer and show you what I mean. So here, right here, can't be too wet. So that's a good start. And then I want to feather out this side here that is not the deer. Okay. That's just a little bit of moon glow. You don't want it hairy all around. That's just, kind of not what you want to see. So we just defined the deer a little bit more. These things have to be taken in stages, right? So I'm going to do the same thing over here a little bit, putting a little bit down for the background and feathering it out. And now we have more of the shape of the deer's body. Right? So if you need to do that, absolutely. If you need to adjust anything on the deer a little bit, feather it in lightly. See like a dark patch right here. make a mark and then move it around and do something with it. Okay. Now, I really feel that these final twig marks are really important. So that's what I want to do next. Because it's all kind of loose and that will sharpen things up. I want to take my raw sienna and I want to get it to be very thick, creamy, because what I want to do is I want it to sit on top of all of those other colors. And if it's not thick with paint and kind of a creamy consistency, it won't sit on top of all of that, of all those other backgrounds. So you're going to ignore everything going on. You're going to ignore your snow. You're going to ignore your flakes. You're going to ignore everything. Keep loading up your brush with more of that beautiful, thick, and go right into your sky. Go right into your sky, okay? Do not line them up like soldiers. That is the last thing you want to do, because these are like those grasses that kind of get bent over and dry so beautifully, but they break, right? They're kind of folded down, and so we kind of see that. And these are those beautiful dry marks that we want to have on here. And go right into your sky, because it's going to be foreground, right? In fact, there's one that's coming right from the deer right here. Make them thin and fine. I'm using my zero rigger. If you can't make a thin, fine mark, practice, because it really does matter. It truly matters that you're able to add these final marks, or what should be final marks, I think, in a beautiful way. I don't particularly like fan brushes because I think they're a little too perfect in terms of how they fan out. I think you get a much better mark with your rigger and just in a really interesting way. Go through the deer, go through your background, go through everything, and break some in half, break them down and have them sort of crisscross. There's no pattern here. Look at what a difference that made to the painting. So this is just kind of lesson learned that, these are ways in which we finish our painting and we see what it needs or what it doesn't. And we could overthink it, right? We could overthink the deer. We could overthink so many things. But now that we're adding these final little marks, and if you wanted some of them to be a little darker, they all don't have to be that color. You can actually make some your moon glow or your shadow violet. Add a little pop drama to it. Think Morse code, little dots and dashes. Nothing really patterned here. But the color is very important, that you use it to be very thick in terms of not a lot of water and lots of paint. And how much more interesting that looks than when we add this in this way. just stand back and make sure that you're not making a pattern anywhere. Okay, that's really kind of important. And if you want to add little tufts further behind, they should be a little finer and a little thinner. I'm really loving raw sienna is just, it's a very opaque color. So it's just perfect for doing this kind of work. But make sure you go into your sky and into your deer. That's really important because it sets the scene, right? It sets the scene. Not crazy for that right there. So I'm going to do something about that. You know, it's funny, I didn't see it before, but now I see this right here. Little tuft of snow going on right here. Now, what I'm going to do is, depending on how you ended up with your snow, okay, you can always splatter a little bit more down. You can use your white or your jaune brilliant, and you could tap, tap, tap more snow in. Where maybe you didn't have enough, or it didn't come out even, or you're missing it in a couple of spots. And again, it should be pretty milky. It should not be a lot of water. And now, I want to get my mat board. Just sort of find my cropping for my color card. Now, I'm not stuck with everything on the bottom. I kind of like it, but I'm not stuck with it because my cropping really gives me the perfect opportunity to find what I love and eliminate anything that I'm not happy with. So this is an excellent way. Maybe I have a little bit too much on this side, kind of like the bottom. Maybe I have a little bit too much on the top. Maybe that's it right there. So you can really find exactly what you're looking for in terms of your composition this way. That's what I love about, you know, if you didn't get the composition quite right first time, you're really not stuck with your painting. That's, I just love that. I love that we have those kinds of choices here. And then an interesting thought I've seen done is, before you overwork it or do too much with it, sign it. There's a little psychological something going on when you sign something. It's a little wet here. That like you're kind of signifying a completeness to it. And it does, it kind of finishes it. You know, it's an interesting psychological kind of thing. And even if you're not done, you know, you can still keep working on it, even with your signature there. Because if I really wanted to crop it up there, I could, but no, I like the bottom. I like the way that looks, right on that edge right there. Like I said, maybe come in a little bit on either side, because maybe you just didn't finish it quite the way you had expected or thought you wanted to. Kind of see some, maybe little marks in here that maybe I could just soften a little bit on his face, just a little bit. I could still work on his face if I wanted to. Totally capable of doing that. Not stuck with anything. Watercolors are so manipulatable. And I think I want to see a little bit of white on the top of his head, ever so slight. Maybe not bright white, maybe the Jean Brilliant, a little bit on the top. Ever so slight, but it kind of does do a little something. And that is a great gift, a great holiday card. It's just so beautiful, and it's every bit as nice as the photo, if not nicer. So that's today's class. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned. I hope you get to integrate these techniques. If you were successful, and from what I saw, you were very successful. I'm so glad. And now you have a little bit more, tools in your tool chest to use and access. So this is Jan Guarino, Fearless Watercolors, and I'll see you next time. Be fearless. Bye now.